You know, I think without conflict, we'd all be pretty bored, wouldn't we?
Frank Verano was born December 11th, 1958.
We call him Nikki now. As a kid, we called him Frank, among other things. When Frank was born, his mother was 17.
She was beautiful. She was striking, and she was very charming. She really tried to do the right things, but as fate would have it, every time she turned around, she made a mistake with this, or made a mistake with that, or a misjudgment on people.
When Frank's father and mother split the sheets with each other, it caused so much hard feelings between them that Frank suffered for it.
My mom was dealing with quite a bit. We had hard times. It was the sole income. She didn't have anybody else to take care of us. And she was also very wild. She liked to party.
One time, his mother took off and went with a truck driver, and she had left him with some woman in Sparks, Nevada. She called his grandmother and I. We picked him up and brought him home with us. When his mom would leave him, he'd never talk about it, except Mom had to go someplace.
We lived in El Paso. We spent at least a year together there with my grandfather and my grandmother and my mom.
We had a hog ranch down in Texas. When Frank was a little boy, he had to fight his way through school. The big kids would grab him and take his money, and one time he loaded a lunchbox full of rock, and when the kid come up after him, Frank just hauled off and batted him with it, and no more problem from then on. We let him get independent for himself. It's the only thing I could do.
My mom and I moved to Seattle when I was probably about 3. Because of my mom's wildness, my grandparents felt that it was best if they took Frank and raised him, at least for a little while.
Frank was kind of brought up like a gypsy because I moved from job to job for a while. And we had the kid with us down in Texas, New Mexico, Lake Tahoe, and Jerome, Idaho. It's a hard life on him.
He got sick of being told what to do.
Frank was having trouble in school a little bit, and it upset me.
I think a lot of Frank's attitude came from being kind of exported.
Frank come to the conclusion that small town was too small. He decided that he'd go back and live with his mother. So his grandmother sent him to Seattle.
Frank came to Roosevelt High School in 10th grade.
When I first met him, he was hitting on my girlfriend.
He was a Peter Frampton lookalike. He had a long shag haircut.
He was really hot. He had like a sandy brown skin and he was real tan, and he had these eyes that were just captivating.
He looked like a rocker kind of guy.
It was fairly obvious that we were the rock and rollers, and I think he really clicked on that.
We had long hair and we dressed pretty flashy.
We were really into a lot of glamour rock.
Alice Cooper, David Bowie.
We were the loudest, hardest rocking band in high school.
I invited him to the house after school to hear the band practice. We had a stage set up in my basement, and we would actually get all dressed up with the satin shirts, and we would walk out there under the lights like it was, the big concert.
As soon as he saw us play, light bulbs went off in his head.
Frank didn't play a note, but he really had the drive.
He bugged Rick, show me how to play.
I started teaching him some things. Somehow or another, I gave him the impression that if he could just get a bass, he could be in the band. One day, Frank walks in a music store down in the University District with an empty guitar case.
And asked for an application. When the guy turned around and went in the back room, Frank very calmly just opened up the guitar case, sticks the guitar in there, closes the case, and then waits. Instead of running out the store, he just stands there. And this person goes back, gives him the application, he says, thanks, no problem.
He comes to the door, and he's all flushed, and he's breathing hard, and look what I got. And he opens it up, and I look at it, and I just can't believe what I'm looking at. And I just said, this is a guitar. This is not a bass.
Even though I was just the stupid drummer, I knew the difference between a Les Paul and a bass.
And the look on his face was just of disappointment and despair. What?
Frank wanted to be in the band, and desperate times call for desperate measures.
We began to find out that Frank was having a lot of trouble at home. I can remember a time when his mom was shouting obscenities behind him. Not real pleasant environment that he was coming from.
I I know he was having fights with his mom quite a bit.
Frank seemed to think that his mom hated him.
He was in those teenage years, growing up and discovering himself. You could tell he was just kind of agitated a lot.
He started to do some drugs.
When Frank and I went out to drink and to party, it was to excess.
You were smoking dope or you were drinking MD-20.
There was a big blow up between him and my mom, and there was just no resolving it. He was not doing well in high school.
By the middle of 11th grade, Frank dropped out altogether.
It got really bad. My mom and him had a talk, and the next thing I know, he went to Idaho.
When Frank came from Seattle to Jerome, he was a different person. He had an axe to grind with the world at that time.
He was talking about what it was like to take acid. It was hard to connect with Frank.
Frank always said that I'm going to be a rock musician if it kills me.
Something inside was telling him to go for his dream.
Between that and partying, that's all he thought about.
He decided to leave.
He had his mind made up and went to Los Angeles to become a rock star.
What a glorious time it was in the late 70s when the Sunset Strip was like the gold rush.
There was just sex everywhere, and there was drugs everywhere.
Frank was living from hand to mouth and sleeping in cars or wherever he could.
We called him up and I'm like, "Hey, Fag, how the hell are you doing, man? What the hell's going on?" And he stopped and he goes, "Sam, I'm only going to tell you this once. Frank Farana is dead. I don't want to be called that. Don't call me that anymore. My name is Nikki Sixx now."
He was adamant. I am not Frank Farana. I am Nikki Sixx, and that's what you need to call me.
He wanted to really erase his past.
The name change was a big part of Frank's metamorphosis. He killed off Frank Farana and rebuilt himself from scratch.
Frank Farana, he couldn't steal a break. Nikki Sixx, that's altogether different.
The first time I ever saw Nikki, we were playing the Whiskey A Go-Go when I was in an all-girl band. You couldn't miss him walking through the door, this hair that just was huge.
He was already dressed for MTV before there was an MTV.
Nikki had the dream of being a rock star. It wasn't like he was driven to learn his instrument. It was a prop. You know, the only thing with that prop, you do have to play a little bit.
This guy didn't even know what a E chord was.
Nikki learned how to be a better musician from our drummer, Lori Bell. They used to practice together. She would just get so furious with him. She'd be slapping her legs really hard, and Nikki just could not keep a beat.
When I first met Nikki Sixx, I was a street kid living in Hollywood. There was just this chemistry. I liked him immediately. I said, "Let's you and me start a band." And he was really happy. Like, he hugged me and he's just like, "Yeah, let's do it, man." And so that was it.
London was fronted by Nigel Benjamin, the former lead singer of the very last incarnation of Motley. Nikki Sixx was the bass player and in many ways the architect of the whole London theme.
We were going to try to perpetuate the classic glitter rock of 74, 75, kind of glitzy, glam, ambisexual, whatever you want to call it. The whole scene in Hollywood at that exact moment was almost permeated with punk rock. Those people wanted no part of it. London would play a sold-out weekend at the Starwood, and then we'd go down there to get paid on Sunday. Nikki had to walk through an entire crowd of wrathful punks, you know, who did not like the way he looked.
The crowd of people, they were laughing at him like, "Oh my God, take a look at these freaks."
And he got spit on like 100 times.
They were just a joke.
We'd play shows, and Nigel would come backstage and go, "That guy sucks, he can't play, I want him out of the band."
Nikki was not a strong musician. Nikki was all over the place.
There was just a lot of turmoil within that group.
Nigel had an extremely huge ego. He goes, "It's Nikki or me." And I said, "No way, Nikki's not going anywhere." Nigel Benjamin quit the band. The magic was gone.
Nikki said, "I want something bigger, I want to shock people, I want to get out there and I want to be known."
One day I'm sitting with Nikki, we're out in my car, and Nikki started crying. And I go, what's the matter? And he goes, this makes me sad to think about it. He was, hold on a second. He started crying because he was quitting the band, and I didn't know that, you know.
Nikki wanted to put together 3 other guys that he had handpicked to be in a star band.
Nikki Sixx was a rock and roll architect, out to build the ultimate heavy metal beast.
I needed 3 or 4 other guys like myself that had nothing to live for other than this band. I definitely found it. 3 of the hungriest guys I ever met in my life. I find beauty in things that people don't necessarily find beautiful. Are you with me now? Are you ready to dig into the things that scare you and expose the raw nerve and get on with our lives? It's okay to be different. I've never done anything like this. I have no idea what I'm doing and no idea how we got here. I don't like being told no by people that don't know what they're talking about. For me, I was told no my whole life, and I was definitely rebellious as a teenager, maybe as a young adult. Maybe there's a little left in me. There's a lot left in me, actually. It's about creating something that inspires people to see things differently.
The first thing you hear when it comes on the radio is that guitar sound and that voice. No one has a voice like Vince.
Coming to Los Angeles was my way of starting over. And I had my guitar, and I had my dream, and I thought I'd sort of learn my lessons. This is beautiful.